5. A 1957 Plymouth Belvedere. In 1957, the state of Oklahoma turned 50, and to honor this celebration, the city of Tulsa decided to leave a time capsule for the inhabitants of Tulsa 50 years in the future. And what more fitting item could they choose than a 1957 Plymouth Belvedere Sport Coupe, brand new and painted in gold and white. Along with the car went hundreds of entries into a competition, which asked citizens what they thought the population of Tulsa would be in the year 2007, when the capsule would be opened again. The winning entry that was closest to the population number would then win the time capsule car. 50 years to the day, on June 15, 2007, the car was dug up from the ground as journalists looked on to photograph this monumental event. The car was swiftly taken to the Tulsa Convention Center for its grand unveiling with Boyd Connington, the star of TLC's American Hot Rod on standby to get the Belvedere running after 50 years of being stored underground. However, tragedy struck when it came to the car's condition. Despite being sealed away in a time capsule that was essentially engineered to be watertight, when the workers were excavating the car, they realized that several feet of murky water had managed to infiltrate the capsule over the years. And as a testament to the sheer amount of water that had gotten in, residual marks left on the inside of the capsule and on the car itself showed that levels had easily surpassed the height of the car in multiple stages. The unveiling of the clearly water-damaged and rusted car was not one that the people of Tulsa had hoped to see. Some of them even shed a tear to see what had become of the vintage Belvedere. Sadly, it seems as though the Plymouth Belvedere is beyond repair, and instead of being a white and gold beauty, it's an eyesore, meaning that many automotive museums have declined to take it on and exhibit it. As for how much damage the water's done, Dwight Foster from New Jersey's Ultra One Mechanics took a look at it and said that it was like dealing with paper mache rather than metal, making it too fragile to do any work on it at all. 4. Penicillin. One of the biggest discoveries in the field of medicine was actually a complete accident. Alexander Fleming had come back from his summer holiday in Scotland in September 1928, ready to start work again as the resident bacteriologist at St. Mary's Hospital in London. He wasn't the kind of man to leave things neat and tidy when he left, so his lab was in quite a mess. However, amongst this mess, he made a groundbreaking discovery. Fleming had been cultivating Staphylococcus bacteria in petri dishes, and he noticed that on some of them, another bacteria had started growing. The area around this new mold was free of Staphylococcus, and where the mold had surrounded it, the bacteria had started to go transparent in the process of dying off. Fleming tried other different types of mold to see if they had the same effect, but it was only the original mold, which he identified as Penicillium notatum, that was able to kill off the other bacteria. Naming it penicillin, Fleming had accidentally found the world's very first antibiotic. And in his own words, he even said, "When I woke up just after dawn on September 28, 1928, I certainly didn't plan to revolutionize all medicine by discovering the world's first antibiotic or bacteria killer. But I guess that was exactly what I did." However, Fleming would not be the end of the story for penicillin, as despite finding it, he was unsuccessful in isolating it into a pure form to use. He gave up on the endeavor in 1931 and promised to send his studies and the bacteria to anyone who wanted to take the project on. Ernst Chain and Howard Florey from Oxford University picked up the torch from Fleming, and they managed to do what he could not, finding out the best conditions in which the mold grew and then isolating it. It was then that the true power of penicillin truly became apparent. Amazingly, their studies and testing found that it could kill off bacterial infections in mice with little to no side effects. Then, in 1940, the first human to be treated with penicillin was a man named Albert Alexander. After scratching himself while pruning a rose bush, an infection seeped into his body, leaving him dying with painful abscesses on his eyes, face, and lungs. After being administered with penicillin via an injection, Alexander started to make an amazing improvement from being at death's door. Sadly, though, there was simply not enough penicillin available at the time to be able to continue treatment, and he died shortly afterwards. This, therefore, prompted the next dilemma for the production of this new so-called miracle cure, and that was how to create a large enough and ready enough supply. To treat a single case of blood poisoning, it required 2,000 liters of peanut tartar mold culture fluid to generate sufficient pure penicillin. American pharmaceutical companies then took on the task of mass-producing penicillin, just as the United States entered World War II. The quest for a fungus that could yield more penicillin per liter also became a priority. In a stroke of luck, Mary Hunt, a laboratory assistant at the US Northern Regional Research Laboratory, stumbled upon a cantaloupe melon harboring a golden mold. This mold turned out to be P. chrysogenum, and remarkably, it produced 1,000 times more penicillin than Alexander Fleming's peanut tartar. All of these accidental discoveries and coincidences helped to create the very first antibiotic that went on to save millions of lives. From the mess of Fleming's lab to the rapid production of World War II speeding up the need for supply, and Mary Hunt finding the rotting melon, it created the perfect storm that changed the game of medicine as we know it. What do you think things would be like if penicillin hadn't been accidentally discovered? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. 3. The Declaration of Independence. In 1989, a man visited a flea market in Pennsylvania and a painting caught his eye. It wasn't anything to do with the painting itself because it was pretty drab and uninspiring. However, he really liked the frame that it came with, so he bought the piece for $4. He brought the painting depicting a country scene home with him and immediately took it out of its frame, which he then realized wasn't as ornate and well-made as he'd first thought. But what he found nestled behind the painting and backing board was a folded-up piece of paper about the same size as an envelope. He unfolded it to find it was a copy of the Declaration of Independence in remarkably good condition. He at first thought it must be a 19th century printing due to the approximate date of the painting that he found it hidden behind, and decided to keep it as a conversation piece. However, it was upon showing it to a friend in 1991 that the man realized there might be more to the document than he first thought. He got in touch with Sotheby's, whose experts were able to find out that it was an incredibly rare first printing of the Declaration of Independence, of which only 24 copies are known to survive. And of those, only 7 are unbacked like the one that the man found on the back of the painting, increasing its value substantially. The fact that this copy of the Declaration had been so untouched meant that it still had blemishes and errors on it from when it was printed. For example, it had been folded in such a hurry freshly after printing that the ink on the very first line transferred onto the bottom margin, creating a mirror image of it. At the time, it was the 4th copy to resurface in the last 10 years. But what was remarkable about it was the fact that it belonged to an owner who had nothing to do with the original document, as the others had all been handed down through families of the original owners from the 18th century. The copy went up for auction on June 4th, 1991 at the world-famous Sotheby's auction house, where it sold for a record $2.6 million, beating the previous record by a whole $1 million. 2. The Microwave. Perry Spencer grew up in humble beginnings in Maine and ended up working at the American Appliance Company at the end of World War I. The company specialized in making missiles and other innovations, including being linked to the Manhattan Project. The company underwent a name change in 1925 to Raytheon Manufacturing Company, and by then Spencer had risen up the ranks despite his low level of education to become one of their top engineers. In World War II, when the company was developing critical solutions to problems faced by US troops, Spencer usually had the answer. He created proximity fuses for artillery shells and helped with the radar technology program at Raytheon. But the main thing that Spencer was passionate about developing was radar magnetrons, which create vibrating magnetic waves, already having earned 2 patents relating to them over the course of his work. In 1946, Spencer was trying to improve the power of the magnetron tubes he was working on, when, feeling like a snack break, he pulled the peanut cluster bar out of his pocket to find that it had melted. Many people mistakenly believe that Spencer had a chocolate bar in his pocket that had melted, but according to his grandson Rod, that simply wasn't his go-to snack. After all, still a nature lover from his childhood, the peanut cluster bar was the perfect snack to share with the squirrels and chipmunks on his lunch break. The fact that it was a peanut cluster bar that melted and went all sticky is a lot more indicative of just how powerful these magnetic waves were, as it has a much higher melting point than chocolate. He then did what any reasonable person would do and grabbed an egg from the canteen, placing it underneath the magnetron tube. And it didn't take long before the egg exploded in his face. The following day, he introduced his invention to his colleague by bringing in popcorn kernels and popping them with his new invention. And that's how the microwave was born. 1. Sylveon. Imagine a time when a golden flowered plant called Sylveon was all the rage in the ancient Mediterranean world, from ancient Greek miracle cures for almost any malady to being a Roman culinary staple, used in almost everything from a simple lentil dish to being paired with flamingo. The plant was so valuable that it was even stored in the imperial treasury of Rome, alongside precious materials such as gold and jewels, and its saplings could fetch a price the same as silver pieces. However, just 700 years after the plant was first discovered, it seemingly disappeared overnight from Cyrenaica, which is now in modern-day Libya. According to the Roman chronicler and historian Pliny the Elder, only one stalk was found in the 1st century AD, and it was seen as so valuable that it was given to the Roman Emperor Nero. Scholars and explorers over the years have been inspired by ancient stories of this plant to go and look for it, with no success, eventually considering it extinct. Although contemporary historians claim that a black rain fell to wipe out the crop, today many believe that it was so popular that it was simply eaten and consumed into extinction. However, by chance and the curiosity of 2 boys, Sylveon may just have been rediscovered over 2,000 years later. This discovery has been the life's work of a professor known as Mahmut Miski, who, back in 1983, was led by 2 local boys in the Cappadocia region of Turkey to look at some strange and rather pungent flowers with acrid resin that oozed from their stalks. Miski was quick to realize that it was a part of the Ferula family, but a completely new species of it, which he named Ferula druidiana. It was as Miski was examining the plant in his lab that he started to see that there were a lot of connections and similarities between Ferula druidiana and the long-lost Sylveon. For one, it had amazing chemical and medicinal properties, including containing compounds that had contraceptive, anti-inflammatory, and even cancer-fighting qualities, which would make sense if it was seen as a cure-all by the ancient Greeks. Another clue came in the fact that the people who looked after the plants often said that sheep and goats enjoyed eating its leaves, something which linked up with ancient texts about sheep being fattened on Sylveon. The pungent sap also seemed to initiate mating behavior in insects around the plants, which Miski found curious, especially given its association in the ancient world with having aphrodisiac qualities. Finally, there was the matter of how the plant grew. Ancient accounts would mention that Sylveon would appear almost suddenly after rainfall, and this was something that Miski observed in the Ferula druidiana, as it would spring from the ground after the April showers, up to a height of almost 6 feet in just a few weeks. Miski published his findings in 2021, and it seemed highly plausible that he had indeed found the long-lost plant, although they would need an ancient sample to confirm this fully. But there was still one thing that had not been tested, and that was its use in cuisine. This is where Sally Granger comes in, a food historian who translated the Roman work Apicius, which contains countless recipes that all include Sylveon in some shape or form. For someone like Granger, finding Sylveon would be like discovering the holy grail of cuisine. So, she and Miski decided to set up a portable kitchen near the plants in Cappadocia so they could finally taste it after 2,000 years. Granger took some of the pearly-colored sap from a thick stalk and added it to some olive oil in a pan. These were the beginning steps of a Roman dressing called lazzaratum. And as soon as the sap hit the heated oil, the scent it gave off made their mouths water. They finally had as much proof as they could get at the time that Sylveon had been found again. However, this created a dilemma for Miski, as there are only around 600 of the plants documented in the area, and unlike other crops and plants, it seemed impossible to cultivate for mass production, something that the ancient world struggled with too. So, it may just be a matter of time before Ferula and Drudiana gets eaten into extinction once again.
9. The American Dream. In 1986, a newly built vehicle called the American Dream shot to fame as the new record holder for the world's longest limousine. Measuring just over 100 feet, or 30.5 meters long, it contained a waterbed, a swimming pool, a jacuzzi, a putting green, living room furniture, a helipad, several TVs, a refrigerator, a phone, and more. The 25,000-pound or 11,340-kilogram vehicle can be driven from both ends and can accommodate up to 75 passengers. Its original builder, custom car designer J. Orberg, based its design on the 1976 Cadillac Eldorado limousine. He equipped each end with a pair of 8-cylinder engines and installed a hinge in the middle of the extra-long car so it could turn corners. During its brief rise to fame, the limo was frequently rented out for appearances in movies and at major events. But the excitement over the car quickly wore off, especially because it was inconvenient to drive and difficult to find parking for due to its size. It stopped receiving regular maintenance and started to rust out as it sat in storage, neglected and forgotten. But the American Dream got a second chance at life thanks to a man named Michael Manning, who owns an automotive teaching museum in Long Island, New York called the Autoseum. When he first saw the car years after it was last used, he described it as graffiti-covered garbage with flat tires, broken windows, and parts that had deteriorated beyond repair. Manning nevertheless fell in love with the vehicle and set his sights on restoring it. But he ran into some funding issues after acquiring the American Dream, and it sat for several more years before he decided to sell it on eBay. Florida-based tourist attraction owner Michael Deser bought it and had it shipped to Orlando. Determined to bring the car back to life, he sought help from Manning, several other experts, and some auto body repair students. Then, 3 years and more than $250,000 later, the limo was finally restored to its former glory. 8. Blastolene B702 and Blastolene Special. Inspired by the French cars of the 1930s, the Blastolene B702 was designed by Michael Leeds and Randy Grubb, who are also known as the Blastolene brothers. While it boasts an obviously European design, the ride is uniquely American, in the words of Randy Grubb, due to its 11-liter GM V12 petrol engine. Known as the Twin Six, the engine was built by General Motors between 1960 and 1965 for use in the company's medium-duty pickup trucks. The Blastolene B702 is characteristic of the oversized custom cars that the Blastolene brothers are famous for designing. And their most famous creation is the Blastolene Special. Better known as the Jay Leno tank car, it was built in 2001 using a Continental AV17905B tank engine, which was once used to power the 51-ton, 51,000-kilogram M47 Patton tank. It also contained a Greyhound bus transmission and featured a retro-style sheet metal body. The engine alone weighs as much as a small car, while the entire 21-foot-long, 6.4-meter car tips the scales at 95,000 pounds, or 43,000 kilograms. Despite its massive size, though, the Blastolene Special has an impressive top speed of over 140 miles per hour, 225 kilometers per hour. In 2003, Jay Leno bought the car for $125,000. and further improved upon its design to make it more roadworthy. He replaced the transmission, improving its fuel efficiency from 2 to 3 miles per gallon to 5 miles per gallon, along with several other components. Leno is often seen driving the Blastolene Special in public, and it also makes frequent appearances at car shows in the greater Los Angeles area. 7. The Orbitron. Made in 1964 by American artist and car customizer Ed Big Daddy Roth, Blue Orbitron's appearance could be compared to that of a futuristic drag racer, powered by a 1955 or 1956 Chevy V8 engine. It had a cockpit lined with faux fur and a portable TV. It was even topped with a hydraulically operated plexiglass bubble roof, and had a distinctive asymmetrical front end with red, green, and blue headlights. The Orbitron was one of Ed Roth's few cars that he considered a mistake, mainly because of how its plexiglass body concealed most of its heavily chromed engine and chassis. He also blamed the car's downfall on the Beatlemania frenzy that swept the nation, diverting the attention even of die-hard car enthusiasts to the breakthrough British band. 3 years after the car was built, Roth sold it to fellow auto customizer Darryl Starbird for $750. Then, during the early 1970s, it landed in the possession of a car collector in Texas who used it for bail collateral. A few years later, the owner sold it to a carnival owner from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. By then, the Orbitron was starting to show serious wear and tear, and it was in much worse condition when it appeared outside an adult bookstore in the mid-1980s. The car had been spray-painted black and was missing its bubble top, its asymmetrical front end, a rear wheel, and several other components. Despite its neglected condition, though, the owner claimed it was a family heirloom and was extremely reluctant to sell it. After intense and lengthy negotiations, the Orbitron was finally returned to the U.S., where famous car customizer Bo Boekman restored it to its former glory at his California shop, where it remains part of his collection today. 6. The Bentley Tank. In 2019, a group of Russian car enthusiasts and YouTubers, who go by the name Academe G, filled their efforts to put tank tracks on a Bentley Continental GT luxury car. Nicknamed the Ultra Tank, it was built using the cheapest Continental the friends could find. They got to work swapping its wheels out for Caterpillar tracks and making other changes and repairs that were needed. The group encountered several problems over the months they spent modifying the vehicle, including faulty brakes and more than one incident where the tracks nearly came off and totaled the body. But they kept working to perfect the Ultra Tank, and the end result was an unlikely-looking contraption with a top speed of 81 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour. And while that's not very fast compared to a Continental GT on wheels, which can reach speeds of over 200 miles per hour, 322 kilometers per hour, it's impressive for a tracked vehicle which is also capable of driving over cars. The YouTubers even unofficially dubbed it the world's fastest tank and said that they plan to continue working to improve its speed in the future. 5. 1948 Norman Timms Special. Norman Timms was a talented engineer from Los Angeles who went down in automotive history for his accomplishments, which included pioneering the use of negative pressure under vehicles, also known as the ground effect. During the 1940s, he decided to devote his spare time to building his dream car. His masterpiece, the 1948 Norman Timms Special, was inspired by the pre-World War II designs of the Grand Prix Streamliners, built by Auto Union, known today as Audi. Timms sketched his vision out years before he actually built the car. Then he began building miniature clay models of the prospective vehicle. He eventually built the actual car, starting with a chassis. A lot of the work that Timms did by hand would be difficult even today with modern equipment. Yet he managed to build the car from scratch with help from renowned custom builder Emil Diet. To maximize its aerodynamic capabilities and streamline design, the 17.5-foot long, 5.3-meter, two-seat roadster has no trunk, hood, or door openings. The engine and spare tire were accessed by pressing a button that activated a hydraulic system that lifted the rear section of the body. It would be an understatement to say that the car was a success. The Norman Timms Special attracted attention wherever it went, and it was even featured in the second issue of Motor Trend magazine in 1949. Sadly, though, it spent decades neglected and rotting, first outside a California restaurant and then in a barn. During the early 2000s, car collector Gary Curvaney bought the Streamliner for $17,000. It underwent a 7-year restoration and spent 8 years being featured in car shows throughout the country before being destroyed in a wildfire at its owner's home in 2018. In 2020, Curvaney told Auto Evolution that the Norman Timms Special is one of 4 cars out of his 76-car collection that he has decided to keep and restore, rather than write off as a total loss. If you could design your own car, what features would you add that aren't typically available in modern-day vehicles? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. 4. The Batman Tumbler. If you've seen the Batman trilogy, then you're likely familiar with the Tumbler, but you may be surprised to learn that the vehicle featured in the movies is a real working car. It took about a year to build the prototype, but the 6 vehicles that followed were built in a shorter amount of time. Each Tumbler was used for a different purpose during filming, and the cars performed real stunts in the street for the camera while reaching speeds of up to 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour. Specialists built each Tumbler from scratch, with each team member tasked with fabricating a single part. The end product was a 5,000-pound, 2,300-kilogram beast that was just as fast as it was powerful, with a set of front wheels that were capable of climbing up a wall with the back wheels on the ground. 3. Firebird 1 XP21. Since the late 1960s, the Firebird has been primarily known as a Pontiac car, but it was also the name for an innovative prototype car built by General Motors during the 1950s. It was a popular time for experimenting with cars, and the Firebird was one of the more out-of-the-box designs born of this era. The XP21 Firebird 1 was the first jet-powered car ever built. It was never meant to enter mass production. It was an experimental vehicle, which allowed its designers more freedom than usual when it came to factors like practicality and budget. Their ultimate goal was to determine whether the gas turbine engine was an efficient and economical option for future vehicles. The 2,500-pound or 1,100-kilogram rocket-shaped creation has a fiberglass reinforced plastic body resembling the fuselage of a winged aircraft. Its interior appropriately resembles the cockpit of a fighter jet, with a single bucket seat, a yoke-shaped steering wheel, and a glass overhead canopy. The Firebird was equipped with an engine capable of 370 horsepower at a power turbine speed of 13,000 RPM, giving it a theoretical top speed of 200 miles per hour or 322 kilometers per hour. Developed specifically for the car, the engine was called the Whirlfire Turbo Power Jet Turbine. Given its experimental nature, only the test supervisor, Emmett Conklin, was entrusted with test driving it. He reportedly reached 100 miles per hour, or 160 kilometers per hour, but nearly crashed after shifting into second gear because the tires lost traction. The close call shook Conklin up enough for him to pass the test driving duties on to professional race car driver and engineer Maury Rose, who had 3 Indy 500 wins under his belt. But Rose only test drove the car a handful of times before General Motors banned high-speed runs. GM still owns the Firebird today, however, it's very rarely displayed in public. 2. Bandera Ford. Back in 2010, a futuristic-looking flying saucer-like Ford was spotted in a Wendy's parking lot in Ohio. So, intrigued bystanders set out to learn the story behind it and discovered a Car and Driver article from 1998 profiling the unique vehicle's builder, John Bender. He built the so-called Bandera Ford and another like it over a 3-year period during the 90s. At the time the article was published, Bender was 68 years old. He was a retired career mechanic and electrician who'd always aspired to design his own car. Bender finally brought his vision to fruition with his 2 Bandera Fords. The Car and Driver article describes the vehicle as a 4-passenger mid-engined coupe with gull-wing doors and a Ford Pinto suspension. The car is only 42 inches or 107 centimeters tall and sits low to the ground. One of the Bandera Fords was white while the other was gold. While it's unclear what happened to the cars, this image of what looks like an abandoned Bandera Ford suggests that at least one of them was deserted and forgotten about at some point in time. Photos of the vehicle that were captured from the Wendy's parking lot in 2010 show that it was visibly aging on both the inside and out, giving the space-age car an ironically outdated look, serving as a reminder that it wasn't something from the future. 1. Loof Electric. During the early decades of car manufacturing, there was something called the cycle car. It was a type of lightweight and inexpensive motor vehicle that was meant to reflect something in between a motorcycle and a full-sized car. One of the most unique cycle cars ever made was the Loof Electric, or the electric egg. It was the brainchild of French industrial designer Paul Arzenz, who designed the car in 1938 and built it 4 years later in 1942. Arzenz thought up the idea of creating an electric car during a fuel rationing period in Nazi-occupied France. The original battery-powered electric egg had an aluminum body with a plexiglass window. Most of its 770-pound or 350-kilogram weight was in its 5 12-volt batteries, which sat underneath the vehicle's bench seat and weighed 130 pounds or 59 kilograms each. The car had a 62-mile or 100-kilometer range and a top speed of 43 miles per hour, 70 kilometers per hour. After World War II, Arzenz replaced the battery-powered engine with a single-cylinder gas engine, raising the electric egg's top speed to 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers per hour. He then drove it until he died in 1990, at which point it was donated to a museum in Paris. It remains on display today at the Cité de l'Automobile Car Museum in the city of Mulhouse. Which of these cars would you be proud to own? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.